On a cold autumn night, our small town was enveloped in fog. At that time, I was 10 years old, heading to an old house in the suburbs with my father. He was a writer researching local legends, and that night, he was particularly interested in the location of that old house. The distance from our home to school was far, and I often accompanied him on his research visits to that house. We left home before the stars began to shine in the sky, and as usual, stopped by a small independent cafe along the way. We were often the first customers, arriving just after the cafe opened. Back then, everything in the cafe was handmade, and the place was always lit with a warm light, with the waitress greeting us. She always had bills in her apron pocket and would count out change using an old register attached to her belt. Behind the cafe, there was a small library, and we often spent time there reading books before the long journey to school. One morning, as usual, we arrived at the cafe before dawn only to find it eerily quiet. There was no sound but the passing wind. The waitress was nowhere to be seen, and it seemed like no one was inside the cafe. My father knocked on the door once, then several more times, but there was no response. We contemplated various reasons for her absence. Initially, my father guessed she might be doing something in the back library, but when she didn't appear, he thought perhaps she had to leave urgently for some reason. We waited a few more minutes, but no other customers arrived. I told my father I needed to use the bathroom and reached for the door handle, but he said we couldn't wait any longer and decided to stop at the next cafe we found. So, we left, still wondering what had happened to the waitress. A few days later, my father was reading the local newspaper and gasped in shock. Excitedly, he showed my mother and me a small article he found. It reported that the waitress from the cafe we frequented had been found dead in the library with multiple stab wounds. The motive appeared to be robbery, as all the cash from the register was gone. Considering the time of the incident, the amount of money taken was probably not significant, but the article did not specify the exact amount stolen. Nevertheless, it did not deter the perpetrator. Since then, I've often thought about how deeply it would have affected me at such a young age if I had insisted on visiting the library that time and discovered the lifeless body of our beloved waitress upon opening the door. Needless to say, we never visited that cafe again.